The entire room feared the Mafia Boss, but one waitress was the only person brave enough to tell him the truth. The words were never forgotten after that night at the most exclusive restaurant in New York City. Damian Blackwood was a name that carried weight everywhere he went. Business leaders respected him, strangers avoided his attention, and people carefully chose every word when he entered a room. He was known as a man who never lost control, a man who built his reputation through discipline, intelligence, and absolute confidence. But on that evening, inside a luxury restaurant filled with expensive suits and influential guests, Damian met someone who did not react the way everyone else did. Her name was Layla Carter. She was a plus-size waitress who had worked there for years, quietly serving customers while carrying a strength that most people never noticed. Layla knew how the world looked at her. She knew some people made assumptions before they ever heard her voice. But she had learned something important long ago. Other people's opinions could only hurt you if you allowed them to decide who you were. When Layla approached Damian's table with his drink order, she remained professional and calm. She expected nothing unusual. She had served many powerful people before. But Damian looked at her with a cold expression that made the atmosphere around the table change. "Is this really the level of service this restaurant provides now?" he asked. The comment was quiet, but everyone nearby understood the meaning behind it. A few guests looked away, uncomfortable. They expected Layla to apologize immediately. They expected her to lower her head. Instead, she placed the glass on the table and looked directly at him. "A person's value is not measured by the space they take up," she said calmly. Damian raised an eyebrow, surprised by her confidence. He was used to people agreeing with him. He was not used to someone responding with honesty. Then Layla continued in Arabic, a language she had learned from her grandmother. "A man who needs to insult others to feel powerful is not strong. He is only afraid." The room became completely silent. Nobody expected those words from her. Damian understood every word. For the first time in years, someone had looked beyond his reputation and spoken directly to the person behind it. He wanted to respond. He wanted to remind her who he was. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the calmness in her voice. Maybe it was the fact that she was not trying to impress anyone. She simply believed what she said. Layla walked away and continued her work, leaving Damian behind with a thought he could not ignore. The woman he had dismissed in seconds had shown more courage than most people he had known for years. And for the first time, Damian Blackwood wondered if the person he underestimated was actually the person who understood him the most. The next morning, Damian Blackwood expected the memory of Layla Carter to disappear like every other unexpected moment in his carefully controlled life. It did not. He returned to his office in downtown New York, surrounded by glass walls, expensive furniture, and people waiting for his decisions. Normally, this environment reminded him of everything he had achieved. But that day, his thoughts kept returning to a waitress who had looked at him without fear. Damian had met countless people who wanted his approval. He had met business partners who praised every decision he made and employees who carefully avoided disagreement. Layla was different. She did not challenge him because she wanted something from him. She challenged him because she believed he was wrong. That difference stayed in his mind. Later that week, Damian found himself returning to the same restaurant. He told himself it was for a business discussion. He told himself there was no other reason. But when he entered and saw Layla calmly helping customers, he knew he was not there only for business. He watched her move through the room with confidence. She remembered customers' preferences, treated every person with respect, and helped new employees without making them feel embarrassed. Damian noticed something he had overlooked before. Layla was not trying to prove she deserved to be there. She already knew she did. That confidence confused him. Most people in his world measured their worth through money, influence, and recognition. Layla measured hers through kindness and integrity. After finishing his meeting, Damian waited until the restaurant became quieter. He approached her near the counter. Layla looked surprised but remained composed. "I did not expect you to come back," she said. Damian paused. Usually, he always knew what to say. This time, the words were harder to find. "You surprised me," he finally admitted. Layla gave him a thoughtful look. "Because I answered you honestly?" she asked. Damian nodded slightly. "Because you were not afraid." Layla smiled gently. Being afraid does not mean someone should stop respecting themselves. Her answer stayed with him. Damian had spent years believing strength meant never showing uncertainty. But Layla saw strength differently. She believed it was standing firm while still choosing kindness. As they talked, Damien learned small details about her life. She worked hard because she wanted to support her family. She continued studying because she believed education created opportunities. She learned Arabic from her grandmother because she valued her family's history. None of these things were connected to wealth or status. Yet they revealed more about her character than any luxury item Damien owned. For the first time, Damien realized he had judged someone based on a single moment instead of an entire story. Layla noticed the change in his expression, but she remained careful. She accepted that people could grow, but she also understood that real change required more than one conversation. Damien respected that. He was used to people accepting his words because of his reputation. Layla accepted nothing without seeing actions behind them. And that was exactly why he could not stop thinking about her. The woman he once dismissed was becoming the one person who made him question everything he thought he knew about power, confidence, and respect. Damien Blackwood had spent his entire life learning how to read people, but he never expected a waitress to become the one person he could not understand. After their conversation at the restaurant, something about Layla Carter stayed in his thoughts. It was not her appearance, her job, or the fact that she had challenged him. It was the way she carried herself. She had no reason to impress him, yet she had shown more confidence than many powerful people he had known for years. That was something Damien could not ignore. A few days later, Damien returned to the restaurant again. This time, he did not come with a business meeting or a formal reason. He came because he wanted to understand the woman who had made him question his own behavior. From a distance, he watched Layla interact with everyone around her. She greeted customers with genuine warmth. She helped her co-workers when they needed support. She treated every person with the same level of respect, whether they were wearing a designer suit or a simple jacket. Damien noticed something important. Layla did not act kind because she wanted approval. She acted kind because it was part of who she was. That realization challenged everything he believed about strength. In Damien's world, people often showed kindness when they wanted something in return. Layla was different. She gave respect without expecting anything back. Later that evening, Damien found Layla organizing supplies after her shift. He approached slowly, something that was unusual for a man who normally walked into every situation with complete confidence. "You work harder than most people I know," Damien said. Layla looked at him with curiosity. "That is an interesting thing to hear from someone who judged me so quickly." Her honesty caught him off guard. In the past, Damien would have dismissed the comment. This time, he listened. "You are right," he said. "I did not know anything about you." Layla looked surprised by his answer. She had expected pride. She had expected an excuse. She did not expect him to admit he was wrong. "People are more than the first impression they create," she said. Damien nodded. Those words felt simple, but they carried a meaning he had ignored for years. He had spent so much time judging others by their usefulness, their status, and their connections that he forgot every person had a story beyond what was visible. As they continued talking, Damien learned more about Layla's life. He discovered that her knowledge of Arabic came from years spent listening to her grandmother share stories about their family's history. He learned that she worked long hours because she believed responsibility was something to be proud of. He learned that her confidence came from accepting herself, not from needing the world to approve of her. For the first time, Damien saw the person behind the uniform. Not a waitress. Not someone he could overlook. A woman with strength, intelligence, and a perspective that made him rethink his own choices. But Layla remained careful. She could see that Damien was changing, but she knew real change was proven over time. She did not need promises. She needed consistency. Damien understood that. The man who once expected people to believe every word he said was now learning that trust was something earned through actions. And as he left the restaurant that night, Damien realized something that surprised him. The woman he once underestimated was not trying to enter his world. Instead, she was showing him a better way to see the world he already lived in. Damien Blackwood had always believed that understanding people was one of his greatest strengths. He could recognize ambition, dishonesty, and hidden intentions within minutes. His entire life had been built around reading situations before they changed. But Layla Carter was different. The more he learned about her, the more he realized that his first impression had been completely wrong. That realization stayed with him as the days passed. Damien began noticing details he had ignored before. He noticed how Layla remembered the names of regular customers. He noticed how she encouraged new employees when they felt uncertain. He noticed how she carried herself with confidence even when others tried to define her by things that did not matter. For the first time, Damien understood that some people carried strength quietly. They did not need attention to prove their value. They simply lived according to their principles. One afternoon, Damien visited the restaurant during a slower shift. Layla was preparing a few tables when he arrived. She looked surprised, but did not seem uncomfortable. "You have been coming here more often," she said. Damien gave a small nod. "Maybe I have been learning something." Layla looked at him carefully. "Learning what?" Damien glanced around the restaurant before answering. "That I was wrong about some things." Those words were difficult for him to say. Damien Blackwood was known as a man who rarely admitted mistakes. His reputation was built on confidence, and many people around him had never heard him acknowledge uncertainty. But with Layla, pretending was becoming impossible. She noticed the difference. She noticed that he was not trying to impress her. He was trying to understand. "Change is not about saying the right words once," Layla said. "It is about what someone does when nobody is watching." Damien remembered those words. They were simple, but they carried more weight than any business advice he had ever received. That evening, Damien began thinking about his own life. He had achieved everything people believed represented success. He had influence, wealth, and a powerful name. Yet he realized there were parts of himself he had ignored for years. He had become so focused on maintaining control that he forgot what genuine connection felt like. Meanwhile, Layla continued living her life without expecting anything from him. She did not chase his attention. She did not ask for special treatment. She continued working, studying, and helping others because those things mattered to her. That was what made Damien respect her even more. She was not impressed by what he had. She cared about who he was becoming. As Damien spent more time around her, he began to see the difference between being powerful and being respected. Power could make people listen, but respect had to be earned. One evening, as they talked outside the restaurant, Damien asked her a question. "How did you become so confident when so many people judge you without knowing you?" Layla smiled softly. "Because I spent too much time trying to prove myself to people who had already decided what they wanted to believe. Eventually, I realized I only needed to know my own worth." Damien stayed quiet after hearing that. Those words reached a place inside him that few people had ever reached. The woman he once dismissed had a lesson to teach him, and for the first time, Damien was willing to listen. Damien Blackwood had spent years building a reputation that made people careful around him. His confidence, his influence, and his ability to stay calm in any situation had become the foundation of his identity. But recently, he found himself facing something he could not solve through strategy or control. He was learning how to become someone better, and Layla Carter was the reason. The change was not something that happened overnight. Damien still carried the habits of a man who had spent most of his life protecting himself. He still analyzed every situation. He still searched for hidden intentions. But when he was around Layla, he began to understand that not every interaction was a negotiation. Some moments were simply about connection. One evening, Damien returned to the restaurant during a special community event. Layla was helping organize the evening, making sure every guest felt welcome. She moved through the room with confidence, speaking with people from different backgrounds and making everyone feel valued. Damien watched as she treated every person with the same respect, regardless of their position or appearance. He realized something that surprised him. Layla did not gain respect because of what she had. She gained respect because of who she was. During the event, one guest made a careless comment about Layla's appearance and questioned whether she belonged in such an environment. Damien noticed the discomfort around the room. In the past, he might have ignored the situation. He might have considered it someone else's problem. But this time he spoke. "Respect is not something people earn by looking a certain way," Damien said calmly. "It comes from the way they treat others." The room became quiet. Layla looked at him with surprise. She remembered the first night they met. She remembered the man who judged her without knowing her. Seeing him defend her values now meant something different. After the event, Damien found Layla outside the restaurant. "I know I was wrong. When we first met," he said. Layla listened carefully. "You were," she replied honestly. Damien accepted the answer. There was no anger in her voice, only truth. "I spent a long time believing that being powerful meant never admitting mistakes," he said. "But I was wrong about that too." Layla looked at him for a moment. Recognizing a mistake is important. But the real question is what someone does afterward. Damien nodded. He knew she was right. He had spent years using his reputation as a shield. It protected him from criticism, but it also kept people from truly knowing him. Layla had never tried to break that shield. She had simply shown him that he did not need it all the time. As the weeks passed, Damien continued changing through small actions. He became more patient with his employees. He listened before making decisions. He started seeing people as individuals instead of roles in his world. Those around him noticed the difference, but Damien did not change for their approval. He changed because he finally understood the value of becoming a better person. Layla had never asked him to give up his strength. She only showed him that true strength included humility. And for the first time in his life, Damien Blackwood was not focused on proving that he was powerful. He was focused on becoming someone worthy of respect. Damien Blackwood had always believed that the hardest challenges in life came from the outside world. He had faced difficult negotiations, complicated decisions, and countless moments where people tested his patience. But now he was discovering that the most difficult challenge was changing himself. For the first time, Damien was not trying to overcome an opponent. He was trying to overcome the person he used to be. Layla Carter noticed the difference, but she also understood that real change took time. She did not suddenly forget the way Damien had treated her when they first met. She remembered the cold words, the judgment, and the way he had looked at her before knowing her story. But she also noticed something important. Damien was no longer defending his past actions. He was learning from them. One afternoon, Damien visited the restaurant and found Layla helping a new employee who was struggling during a busy shift. The young woman looked embarrassed after making a mistake, but Layla calmly explained what to do and reminded her that everyone had moments where they needed to learn. Damien watched quietly. He realized that Layla had a way of making people feel capable instead of making them feel small. That was something he had rarely seen in his own world. Later, as they walked outside the restaurant, Damien asked her a question. "How do you always know what to say to people?" Layla smiled. "I do not always know what to say. I just remember what it feels like when someone makes you feel invisible." Her answer stayed with him. Damien had spent years surrounded by people who wanted his attention, but very few people had ever made him feel understood. Layla did not try to impress him. She did not treat him differently because of his name. She simply treated him like a person. As Damien continued spending time with her, he began to understand why she was different. Layla had experienced judgment from people who never took the time to know her. Instead of becoming bitter, she chose to become kinder. That choice impressed him more than any achievement he had seen. However, not everyone around Damien understood his changing perspective. Some people questioned why he spent time with someone outside his usual circle. They believed a man like Damien should only associate with people who could increase his influence. Damien listened to those opinions, but for the first time, he did not let them decide what was right. He knew what he had discovered. Value was not determined by status. It was revealed through character. That evening, Damien told Layla something he had never admitted to anyone before. "I spent a long time believing people respected me because they feared disappointing me." Layla looked at him carefully. "And now?" Damien took a moment before answering. "Now I think real respect comes from giving people a reason to trust you." Layla smiled. It was not a dramatic moment. There were no grand promises. Just two people having an honest conversation. But for Damien, it meant more than he expected. The man who once believed strength meant standing above others was learning a different lesson. True strength was not about making people feel small. It was about having enough confidence to lift others up. And as Damien looked at Layla, he realized that the person who changed his perspective was never trying to change him at all. She simply showed him a better version of himself that had always been there. Damien Blackwood had spent most of his life believing that reputation was everything. A powerful name could open doors, influence decisions, and make people think twice before challenging him. But as time passed, Damien began to understand something he had never considered before. A reputation built on fear could create distance, but a reputation built on respect could create trust. That difference became clearer when an important evening brought Damien and Layla Carter into the same room again. The event was held at a private venue in New York, filled with business leaders, community representatives, and people who wanted to be seen beside influential figures. Damien arrived as expected, and attention immediately followed him. But this time, people noticed something unexpected. He was not focused on proving his importance. He was focused on making sure everyone around him felt included. Layla was attending because she was helping with a community project connected to the restaurant. She stood among people with impressive careers and expensive clothing, yet she remained completely comfortable being herself. Damien watched as she spoke with guests, answered questions, and encouraged others to share their ideas. She did not act like she belonged there because someone invited her. She acted like she belonged because she knew her own value. During the evening, a guest made a careless comment about Layla and questioned whether someone with her background should be involved in such an event. The words were not aggressive, but they revealed the same kind of judgment Damien once had. He noticed Layla remain calm, but he also noticed the unfairness of the situation. Before he could think about it, Damien responded, "A person's contribution is not determined by where they started," he said. "It is determined by what they bring to the world." The room became quiet. People looked at Damien with surprise because they remembered the man he used to be. Layla looked at him differently too. She knew this was not the same person who had judged her during their first meeting. Later that night, Layla and Damien talked outside the venue. The city lights reflected across the streets as they discussed everything that had changed between them. "You defended me because you felt responsible," Layla said. Damien shook his head. "No, I defended you because I finally understood." Layla waited for him to continue. "I used to think power meant having the ability to decide what mattered. But I was wrong. Power means knowing what is worth protecting." Layla smiled, but she remained honest. "You are changing, Damien. But remember, change is not proven by one moment." Damien nodded. He appreciated that she never allowed him to take the easy path. She did not praise him simply because he was trying. She reminded him that becoming better was a choice he had to make every day. That was exactly why he respected her. Layla never wanted control over his life. She never wanted his influence or his name. She only wanted honesty. And for a man who had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him, that honesty was the rarest thing he had ever found. Damien Blackwood was still the same person with the same responsibilities and the same powerful position. But something inside him had changed. He no longer wanted people to remember him because they feared him. He wanted them to remember him because he gave them a reason to respect him. And the person who helped him discover that truth was the woman he once failed to understand. Damien Blackwood had spent years believing that people either belonged in his world or they did not. There were clear divisions in his mind. People with influence stood on one side, and everyone else stood on the other. But Layla Carter had changed the way he saw those lines. She showed him that a person's value was never determined by their position, their appearance, or the opinions of others. It was determined by their character. As weeks passed, Damien continued proving that his changes were real. He did not expect praise. He did not look for recognition. He simply started making different choices because he finally understood their importance. Layla noticed every small difference. She noticed how he listened more carefully during conversations. She noticed how he treated people with more patience. She noticed that he no longer acted as if every interaction was a challenge he needed to win. One evening, Damien invited Layla to a charity event organized by his company. He wanted her perspective because he had learned that she saw things others often missed. When they arrived, many guests were surprised to see them together. Some people knew Damien as a powerful businessman with a reputation for being impossible to influence. They did not understand why he valued the opinion of someone who worked as a waitress. But Damien did not care about their assumptions anymore. During the event, Layla spoke with different guests about community programs and opportunities for people who often felt overlooked. Damien watched her with admiration. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply sharing ideas she believed could make a difference. At that moment, Damien realized something important. Layla had never needed his approval. She had always carried her own confidence. Later that evening, one of Damien's longtime associates approached him and questioned his choices. He suggested that Damien was allowing personal feelings to affect his reputation. In the past, Damien might have listened. He might have worried about how others viewed him. Instead, he calmly answered, "Respecting someone does not make me weaker. It reminds me what kind of person I want to be." Those words represented the biggest change in Damien. He was no longer trying to prove that he was untouchable. He was accepting that being human was not a weakness. After the event, Layla and Damien stood outside, looking over the city. "You handled that differently than the man I first met," Layla said. Damien smiled slightly. The man you first met thought being right was more important than being fair. Layla looked at him. And now? Damien took a moment before answering. Now I think understanding someone matters more than judging them. It was a simple statement, but Layla knew how much it meant. Damien was not someone who changed because another person demanded it. He changed because he finally saw the world differently. He understood that the strongest people were not those who never admitted mistakes. They were the ones who had the courage to grow. For the first time, Damien Blackwood was not afraid of losing the image he had built. He realized that the person he was becoming was far more valuable than the reputation he had protected for so long. And beside him was the woman who never tried to change his life. She simply showed him that there was more to life than power, status, and control. Years later, Damien Blackwood still remembered the night he first met Layla Carter. Not because it was the night someone challenged him, but because it was the night he began seeing the world differently. Before Layla entered his life, Damien believed success was measured by influence, reputation, and the ability to control every situation. He believed strength meant never showing uncertainty and never allowing anyone to question him. But Layla taught him something far more valuable. True strength came from understanding, humility, and the courage to become better. Their journey was never about one person saving another. Layla never needed Damien to change her life. She had already built her own strength through years of hard work, patience, and determination. What changed was that Damien finally learned how to see the person in front of him instead of the assumptions he had created. Over time, people around Damien noticed the difference. He was still a respected businessman. He still carried the confidence that made him successful. But there was a warmth in the way he treated others that had not existed before. Employees felt heard. People around him felt valued. Damien had not lost his ability to lead. He had simply learned that leadership was not about making others feel smaller. It was about helping people become stronger. Layla continued following her own dreams. She remained connected to her community, continued supporting others, and never forgot the lessons that shaped her. She had always known her worth, even when others failed to recognize it. That was one of the qualities Damien admired most about her. She never changed herself to gain acceptance. She simply waited for the world to see what had always been there. One evening, Damien and Layla returned to the restaurant where everything began. The place looked almost the same, but they were different people. Damien looked around and remembered the man he had been when he first walked through those doors. He remembered the assumptions he had made and the mistake of judging someone before knowing their story. "I thought I knew what strength was," Damien said quietly. Layla smiled. "And what do you think now?" Damien looked at her and answered honestly. "I think strength is having enough confidence to admit when you are wrong. I think it is choosing respect even when you have the power to choose something else." Layla smiled because she knew those words came from a person who had truly changed. Damien Blackwood was still a man with influence and ambition, but he was no longer defined only by those things. He was defined by the choices he made and the way he treated people. The woman he once misunderstood became the person who showed him a better version of himself. She never asked him to give up his identity. She only showed him that there was more to being powerful than being feared. In the end, Damien discovered that the greatest achievement in life was not building an empire or earning a respected name. It was finding someone who helped you become the person you were always capable of becoming. And for Damien Blackwood, that person was Layla Carter, the woman who reminded him that every person has a story worth knowing before they are ever judged.